Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and the rhythmic hum of the lawnmower filled the air as I pushed it across the yard. The sun was high, and the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint scent of barbecue wafting over from a neighbor's yard. It was one of those days that made me grateful for the little things. Our home, our family, and the peace of this simple life. But then, as I made another pass, I saw Clara dart across the yard like a bolt of lightning, her face flushed and streaked with tears. She didn't even glance my way as she ran inside, slamming the front door behind her so hard it rattled the windows. I shut off the mower, my heart sinking. Something was wrong. Brushing the grass clippings off my hands, I made my way inside, wiping my shoes on the mat before stepping into the house. Angela wasn't home. She had taken the Lexus to run some errands. That left me alone to figure out what had upset Clara so much. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, and stopped outside her bedroom door. It was shut tight, with no sign of the cheerful, chatty girl who usually filled the house with laughter. "Clara," I knocked gently, keeping my voice calm. "Sweetheart, it's Dad. Are you okay in there? Go away." Her voice shot back, muffled but sharp with emotion. "Hey, talk to me. What's wrong?" I tried again, leaning against the doorframe. "Did something happen? Was it something I did?" "No," she shouted. "Just leave me alone, Dad." Her words stung, but I could hear the quiver in her voice, the kind that said she was holding back more tears. My instinct was to push, to stay there and make her tell me what was wrong. But I knew better. Clara wasn't the little girl who used to come running to me with her problems anymore. She was 17 now, caught between being a child and becoming an adult. "All right," I said softly, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. "You'll be downstairs if you need me. Okay? I'm here, Clara. Always." We verbally tussled like that for a minute or two. Finally, I said, "Maybe you'd feel more comfortable talking to Mom a little later." She cut me off and pushed me out into the hallway. "No," she screamed, and I heard her locking her door. Very strange. I thought it had to be some boy. I was wrong. Then there was no response, only the faint sound of her sniffling behind the door. I stood there for a moment longer, unsure of what else I could do, then reluctantly turned and made my way back down the stairs, my mind swirling with questions. What could have upset her so badly? Was it school? Friends? Something I'd missed entirely? Whatever it wasn't like Clara to shut me out. Back in the kitchen, I stared out the window at the half-mowed lawn, my chest tight with worry. Some 8 hours later, Angela's car rolled into the driveway. Clara had stayed in her room all day, only coming out for a couple of quick trips to the... I decided to give her some space, planning to talk to her the following day. As soon as Angela shrugged off her coat, I filled her in on Clara's strange behavior. Angela looked puzzled. She mentioned that Clara had asked to go to the mall after Angela had already left for work. But Angela hadn't known Clara had actually gone. When I described where Clara had been, how she'd returned early, and her emotional state, crying uncontrollably, Angela's face turned pale. Two women losing it in the same house? Great, I thought. Marcus'll talk to her in the morning. Sounds like girl trouble to me, Angela said. You go play tennis or something. Okay. Yeah, sure. Sounds good, I agreed, backing down. Angela watched as her husband drove away, bracing herself for what she knew would be a difficult confrontation with her daughter. Though she couldn't predict exactly how it would unfold, she knew it wouldn't be easy. She knocked softly on Clara's door. "Go away," came the sharp reply from within. "Clara, it's me, Mom," Angela called gently. "Leave me alone, you liar," Clara screamed. Angela felt her knees weaken, her worst fears nearly confirmed. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself. She had already retrieved the spare room key from atop the refrigerator. Slowly and quietly, she inserted it into the lock, turned it and pushed the door open. Clara was huddled on the floor in the corner near the window. The bed was still untouched, and she looked utterly distraught, her face tear-streaked from what seemed like hours of crying. "Clara, what's going on? Why are you acting this way?" Angela asked, still clinging to the hope that the situation might not be what she feared. "Are you serious?" Clara shot back, rising to her feet and advancing toward her mother. Her voice dripped with anger. "You think I didn't see you? Abby saw you. Jenna saw you. We all saw you. Hugging, kissing, acting like a lovesick teenager with that man. Richard Malone, isn't it?" Did you know he's named after some fictional villain? What? Angela stammered, confused. Richard Malone, Mom, like some character from an old movie. But that's beside the point. You're having an affair, aren't you? Clara accused, her voice sharp and unwavering. Angela hesitated, caught off guard. He's not /you 2026, I mean, it's not what you think, she tried, her voice faltering. Don't lie to me, Clara snapped. We saw you, Mom. How could you do this to Dad? Angela's composure broke, and she slapped Clara across the face, her frustration boiling over. Don't you ever raise your hand to me again, Clara warned coldly. I'm stronger than you think, and I won't hesitate to defend myself. Angela's hands trembled as she nodded, her voice trembling with regret. I'm so sorry, Clara. I shouldn't have done that. Clara held up a hand to silence her. Enough. What I want now is the truth. You're going to tell me everything, and then you're going to confess to Dad when he gets home. Angela's eyes widened with fear. Clara, if I tell him, he'll leave me. I know I deserve it, but is that really the best way forward for any of us? You're asking me if honesty is the best way? Yes, Mom, it is. Start talking. Angela sighed heavily, tears welling up in her eyes. I met Richard at the company picnic last August. You were there, and so was your father. I know who he is, Clara interjected. He's a car dealer. I know his daughter, Mia. We have classes together. I didn't know you were seeing him behind Dad's back, though. Angela's expression turned to surprise. I didn't realize you knew his family. And I didn't realize my mother was betraying my father, Clara retorted coldly. But here we are. You are seeing him, aren't you? Angela began to cry. Yes, I am. He asked me to lunch a few months ago, and your father and I were going through a rough time. I made a terrible mistake. I let him take me to a hotel and we were intimate. You slept with him? Clara demanded, say it. Yes, Angela admitted softly. I slept with him. How many times? Every week since September, Angela confessed. He tells me I'm beautiful. Makes me feel appreciated. Things your father hasn't said to me in a long time. Clara's face twisted with disgust. Do you love him? Angela hesitated. No, she said firmly. He's a distraction, nothing more. I've only ever loved your father. Clara's eyes narrowed, her anger simmering beneath the surface. Then why didn't you think about Dad before you started this? What are you going to do now? Do you even have a plan? Angela's tears fell freely now. I don't know, Clara. I've made such a mess of everything. You're right about that, Clara said icily. And you'll need to figure out how to make it right, starting with the truth. I don't know what to say, Clara, Angela murmured, her voice breaking. I was weak. I gave in. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to stop it. Richard even implied that if I didn't keep seeing him, your father, David, would find out. Felt like blackmail. But I'm not making excuses. I made the choice and am guilty. I'll do whatever you think is right. Her words dissolved into sobs as she sank to the floor. Clara stood over her, her expression stern and unyielding, embodying a fierce resolve. This isn't about me, Mom, Clara said firmly. It's about what Dad is going to do when he finds out. You didn't just betray him. You've damaged this family. Do you understand that? Clara paced the room, her anger tempered slightly by the sight of her mother's despair. She stopped and softened her tone. You have to confess to him, Mom. No lies, no excuses, no half-truths. If you want, I'll be there with you. But let me ask you, do you even want to stay with Dad? Or is that over too? Of course I want to stay with him, Angela cried. But if I confess, I know he'll leave me. I deserve it, but it will tear us apart. I'm terrified, Clara. I'm sure you are, Clara said, her voice steady. She sat beside her mother and placed a hand on her shoulder. But you have to tell him everything. The truth, Mom. All of it. Angela nodded weakly. Clara's tone sharpened again. One more thing, and it has to be the truth. Have there been others? Don't lie to me. Angela's sobs deepened, and Clara paled as realizations set in. How many? Clara asked quietly. 2, Angela whispered, barely audible. Clara closed her eyes, her expression filled with dismay. This is worse than I thought, she said. Dad is going to be devastated. And honestly, Mom, I don't even know what to say to you anymore. Angela looked up at her daughter, seeing not just anger, but a strength and determination that far exceeded her years. They'll tell him, Angela said softly. They'll tell him everything. Later that evening, I came home still thinking about the lawn I hadn't finished mowing. The house was quieter than usual, But I didn't think much of it until I stepped into the kitchen and saw Angela waiting for me. She was sitting at the table, her hands clenched tightly, her eyes red and swollen. A lump formed in my throat immediately. "David, we need to talk," she said softly, her voice already cracking. I frowned, setting my keys on the counter. "What's going on?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, and my heart sank. "I've done something unforgivable." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my stomach knotting as a sense of dread filled me. Angela inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself, but the tears spilled over. "I've been having an affair." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her, as though she'd spoken in a language I couldn't understand. "What?" I finally managed to choke out. "I was weak, David. I was lonely. I felt unappreciated, and I made the worst mistake of my life," she said, her voice shaking. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice rising. "You're telling me this now? After months? Why now, Angela?" She glanced toward the stairs, her face full of guilt. "Clara saw me today. She knows. She confronted me, and I couldn't lie to her." "So you're only telling me because you got caught?" I said, my voice hard. "Not because you felt guilty or thought I deserved the truth." "Unbelievable." Angela sobbed harder, but I was too angry to care. "David, I'm so sorry. I love you. I don't want to lose you. Please, I'll do anything. Anything to fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You don't fix a marriage by betraying your spouse, Angela. You don't fix it by sleeping with someone else." "Dad, please stop," came a voice from behind me. I turned to see Clara standing in the doorway, her eyes red but filled with determination. "Mom told you the truth. She knows she messed up. You have to forgive her." "Forgive her?" I asked, incredulous. "Clara, she didn't confess because she wanted to make things right. She confessed because you caught her. There's a big difference." "Maybe, but she's sorry," Clara insisted, stepping closer. "If you don't forgive her, this family will fall apart." "Do you really want that?" "I didn't break this family, Clara," I said, my voice firm. "Your mother did, and I'll tell you something else. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand. It has to be earned." "Dad," Clara said, her voice trembling. "If you don't forgive her, I'll leave. I'll run away. I can't live in a house where there's so much hate." Her words stopped me in my tracks. "Clara, don't do this," I said. "You don't understand how deep this cuts. Your mother didn't just cheat on me. She destroyed the trust we had. She made vows to me and she broke them. That doesn't just go away because she says she's sorry." "Dad, you're being stubborn," Clara said. "People make mistakes. Some mistakes are bigger than others," I replied, my voice tight. "And some mistakes show who a person really is. Once a cheater, always a cheater." The weeks following Angela's confession were nothing short of hell. The air in the house was thick with tension. Every conversation was strained and clipped. I stayed out late most nights, either walking aimlessly or nursing a drink at the bar. Angela tried to bridge the gap, but I couldn't look at her without feeling the weight of her betrayal. One night at the bar, as I was nursing my second whiskey, the bartender, Tom, leaned over the counter. "David, I don't know if you want to hear this, but you should know." "Know what?" I asked, already bracing for something bad. "It's about Richard," he said, lowering his voice. "He's been running his mouth, bragging about being with Angela." The glass in my hand froze midair. "What did you say?" "He's telling anyone who'll listen that he's been sleeping with Angela," Tom said hesitantly. "I figured you'd want to know." Rage surged through me like wildfire. My grip on the glass tightened until my knuckles turned white. "Thanks for letting me know, Tom," I said, my voice ice cold. I paid my tab and left, my mind racing. By the time I got home, I'd already made up my mind. Angela was in the living room folding laundry. She looked up as I walked in and immediately sensed something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked cautiously. "Call Diane," I said flatly, not even looking at her. "What?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "You heard me. Call Richard's wife and set up a meeting," I said, my tone sharp. "You're going to tell her everything." Her face paled. "David, I don't care what you think," I snapped. "This is happening. If he's going to run his mouth about sleeping with my wife, then you're going to own up to it. every bit of it. Call her now. Angela hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes, but she nodded. She reached for her phone and dialed Diane's number. I stood there, arms crossed, listening as the call went through. "Hi, Diane. It's Angela," she began, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to you. It's about Richard. Can you come over tomorrow? It's important." I could hear the confusion in Diane's voice on the other end. Angela glanced at me, unsure, but I gestured for her to continue. "It's serious," she said, her voice cracking. "Please just come over. I'll explain everything." After a few moments, Angela hung up and looked at me with pleading eyes. "She'll be here tomorrow." "Good," I said curtly. "Get ready to tell her the truth." The next day, Diane arrived just after lunch. She looked concerned but calm as she stepped into the house. I led her into the living room, where Angela sat, wringing her hands. "What's this about?" Diane asked, glancing between us. Angela's voice was shaky as she started. "Diane, I need to tell you something. I've been involved with Richard. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, and it should never have happened." Diane's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, anger, hurt. "You're saying you've been sleeping with my husband?" she asked, her voice sharp. Angela nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'm so sorry. It was wrong, and I take full responsibility." Diane stood abruptly, her face a mask of fury. "I can't believe this. After everything, you've destroyed my family." I stayed silent, watching as Diane stormed out of the house. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt empty. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting things right, no matter how ugly the process was. The next day, word spread quickly. Diane had filed for divorce and a restraining order against Richard. She wasn't wasting any time. In court, Diane's case was solid. She won the house, custody of their kids, and most of their shared assets. Richard was left with practically nothing and had no choice but to leave town for a new job. It had been 2 months since the disaster broke loose, and while Angela and I were under the same roof, the chasm between us was wide and unbridgeable. I stayed in the spare room, avoiding any semblance of intimacy. She tried small gestures here and there, but I wasn't ready. Trust didn't rebuild itself overnight, and in her case, I wasn't sure it ever would. One evening, as I sat in the living room flipping through the channels, Clara approached. She hesitated at first, then stood in front of me, blocking my view of the TV. "Dad, can I ask you something?" she said, her voice quiet but firm. I muted the television and looked at her. "What is it, Clara? Why are you still sleeping in the other room?" she asked, her tone tinged with both curiosity and concern. "It's been months. Mom's trying, and I thought you were going to give her a chance." I let out a slow breath, leaning back into the couch. "Clara, this isn't your business." "But it is my business," she shot back, her voice rising. "You and Mom are my family, and I want things to go back to normal." "Normal?" I said, my voice hardening. "Clara, there is no normal after what your mother did. Trust doesn't just reappear because someone says they're sorry. She betrayed me. She betrayed us. You might think everything's fine because I didn't file for divorce, but things are far from fine." Clara's eyes glistened with tears. "You're punishing her, Dad. She made a mistake, and she's trying to make up for it. Why can't you forgive her?" I stood up, towering over her, my tone sharp and unyielding. "I stayed because you forced me to, Clara. You didn't want us to divorce, remember? You got what you wanted. Now stay out of it. Go to your room." Her face crumpled, and she ran upstairs in tears. I watched her go, the anger in me simmering but laced with guilt. I hated making her cry, but she needed to understand that this wasn't as simple as saying, "I forgive you." The next day, I met Nathan, my oldest friend, at a diner we used to frequent. He was already at the booth, sipping coffee when I arrived. He waved me over, and I slid into the seat across from him. "You look like hell," Nathan said, his mouth twitching into a half-smile. "Thanks," I muttered, signaling the waitress for coffee. "Needed that observation." "What's going on, Dave?" he asked, his tone shifting to concern. "You've been a ghost these past couple of months." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. "Where do I even start?" "Wherever you need to," Nathan said, his eyes steady on mine. So I did. I told him everything. From Clara catching Angela to her forced confession to Clara's ultimatum that kept me from filing for divorce. Nathan listened, nodding occasionally, but not interrupting. When I finished, I leaned forward, gripping my coffee mug. "She made me promise to stay," I said, shaking my head. "Clara's got this idea that families can survive anything, that love conquers all, or some crap like that. So here I am, in the same house with a woman I can't trust, trying to keep the peace." Nathan studied me for a moment, then asked, "Why are you really staying, Dave? Because of Clara? Or because you think there's still something worth saving?" I let out a dry laugh. "Because of Clara," I said firmly. "She thinks I'm teaching her about forgiveness, about keeping a family together no matter what. But the truth? I'm teaching her a much harder lesson." "What lesson is that?" Nathan asked, his brow furrowed. I stared into my coffee, my voice low but resolute. "Once a cheater, always a cheater." Nathan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "So what are you going to do now, Dave? Just sit in that house and stew?" I shook my head. "No, I'm not the kind of guy who walks blindly into the future. I need to know. Richard might have been the first one Clara caught, but was he the only one? Or just the last one I found out about? If there's more, I want the truth, Nathan. All of it." He gave me a long look before nodding. "You're asking me to investigate your wife?" "That's exactly what I'm asking," I said, meeting his gaze squarely. "You're my oldest friend. If anyone's going to do this right and keep it quiet, it's you." Nathan let out a sigh, then leaned back in his chair. "All right, I'll take the case, but you know how this goes. If I dig, I might find things you're not ready to hear." "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure," I replied. "I need answers. I can't live in this limbo." He nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "If I'm going to do this properly, I'll need access to your house. Cameras, audio. I need to see what she's up to when you're not there." Took me a moment to reply. "You want to put cameras in my house?" "Only in common areas," Nathan clarified quickly. "Living room, kitchen, maybe outside if you want. Nothing invasive, but it's the best way to know what's really going on." I thought about it for a moment before nodding. "Do it, but I don't want Clara knowing about this. She's been through enough." "Understood," Nathan said. "When can my team set it up?" "Tomorrow," I said firmly. "Angela and Clara will be out for the day. Make it happen." The next morning, while Angela was out running errands and Clara was at school, Nathan's team arrived. They worked quickly and efficiently, placing cameras in strategic locations without leaving a trace. By the time they were done, the house looked exactly as it had before, but now it had eyes everywhere. That evening, over dinner, I broke the news to Angela and Clara that I'd be out of town for a few days. "I've got a business meeting in the city," I said, casually cutting into my steak. "I'll be gone for 3 days." Clara looked up from her plate. "You're leaving? Why now?" "Work's work," I said with a shrug. "You'll be fine. You're practically an adult." She rolled her eyes. "Practically." I turned my attention to Angela, who was unusually quiet. "Angela, I assume you can manage things while I'm gone?" She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Of course." "Good," I said, setting my fork down and leaning back in my chair. "Clara, take care of yourself. Don't stay out too late, and don't invite anyone over without letting me know." "Got it," Clara said, though she looked a little annoyed. I then turned to Angela, my tone sharper. "And you, try not to spend the time screwing another lover." Her face turned pale and the room fell silent. I pushed my chair back, leaving her to sit with the weight of my words. The first morning away, I sat in the sterile conference room of my so-called business trip, my phone vibrating in my pocket. I glanced down. It was Nathan. I excused myself and stepped out into the hallway. "Nathan." His voice was heavy on the other end. "Dave, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've got something you're not going to like." I clenched my jaw. "Spit it out." "It's not just Richard," he said. "My guys found evidence pointing to at least 3 more men." My stomach dropped. 3 more? At the same time? "Yes," Nathan said. "I wish I was wrong, Dave, but my gut tells me there's even more we don't know." I rubbed my hand down my face, frustration mounting. "Do we have names?" "Not yet, but we're working on it." By evening, I was sitting in my hotel room, trying to process it all when Nathan called again. This time, his tone was sharper, more urgent. "David, you're going to want to sit down for this," he said. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. "She's at your house," Nathan said grimly. "With another man." My stomach twisted into a knot. "At my house?" "Yes. My team's cameras caught them going in, and she's acting like it's just another day." I exhaled slowly, feeling my grip on the phone tighten. "They're screwing in my house? Under my roof?" "That's exactly what's happening," Nathan confirmed. "Do you want us to intervene?" "No," I said, my voice cold and deliberate. "Let her dig her own grave. Just keep collecting the evidence." For the next 2 days, Nathan's team did just that. Every sordid detail, every damning action was documented. I stayed updated through periodic calls and texts, each one adding another layer to the anger simmering inside me. By the time I returned, the evidence against Angela was overwhelming. I dropped my bags by the door, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on me like a storm cloud. The house was silent. Angela at her office, Clara at school. For a brief moment, I allowed myself the hollow relief of being alone, but I had no time to waste. I grabbed my keys and headed straight for Nathan's office. When I walked in, Nathan was already waiting, the expression on his face as somber as I felt beneath my calm exterior. "Dave," he started, motioning for me to sit. "We've wrapped things up, and it's not pretty." I sat down, leaning forward. "Let's hear it." He handed me a folder. "Angela's been involved with 3 men we've confirmed: Michael Turner, her co-worker at the office, Alex Rivera, a personal trainer, and Sean Mitchell, a contractor who worked on your house last year." I let out a dry, humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Quite the variety. Damn. She's really doing her part to keep the community entertained." Nathan smiled faintly, though his eyes stayed serious. "Dave, you might joke, but I know this isn't easy for you." I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my temples. "Oh, I'm fuming, Nate. Don't mistake my jokes for anything else. But what's done is done." Nathan studied me for a moment, then asked cautiously, "What do you want to do now?" I sighed, leaning forward again. "It's not about me anymore. It's about Clara. She needs to see this, all of it. She wanted me to stay, to forgive, to try again. Fine. I did for her. But this time, if she tries to pull the 'I'll run away' card, I'll open the damn door for her myself. I'm done." Nathan raised an eyebrow, clearly weighing his next words. Then he asked, with a quiet, deliberate tone, "Dave, is Clara really your daughter?" Nathan's question hit me like a sledgehammer. I froze, the weight of his words sinking in. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of it, to even fathom the possibility. For 17 years, Clara had been my daughter, my little girl. The thought that she might not be mine felt like the final stab in the back. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the floor. My voice came out hoarse. "You think she isn't?" Nathan held up his hands defensively. "I don't know, Dave, but with everything we've uncovered about Angela, I thought you might want to know for sure." For a long moment, I didn't speak. I stared at the folder in front of me, feeling the storm of emotions threatening to consume me. Finally, I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "All her life, she's called me her father. Even if she's not my blood, that doesn't change the fact that I've raised her. She's mine in every way that matters." "But yeah, Nate, a DNA test wouldn't hurt." Nathan nodded solemnly. "I'll arrange it." Quietly. "Thanks," I muttered, my voice devoid of emotion. A week later, Nathan handed me the envelope containing the DNA results. My hands trembled as I tore it open, my heart pounding against my ribs. The words blurred before my eyes, but the message was unmistakable. Probability of paternity 0%. I stared at the paper, my mind refusing to process it. Clara wasn't mine. The girl I had raised, the girl I had sacrificed everything for, wasn't my daughter. Nathan's voice broke through the fog. "Dave, I'm sorry." I slammed the paper down on the table, my anger bubbling to the surface. 17 years, Nate. 17 fucking years. And she lied to me about this too. "She'll have to answer for it," Nathan said quietly. "Damn right she will," I spat, grabbing the folder with the evidence of Angela's affairs. I'm done playing the patient husband. That evening, I returned home, the envelope with the DNA results and Nathan's folder in my hands. Angela and Clara were in the living room watching TV. The sight of them, of Angela sitting there like nothing was wrong, made my blood boil. "Turn it off," I barked. Angela and Clara both turned to look at me, startled. Clara grabbed the remote and muted the TV. "What's going on, Dad?" I ignored her, focusing on Angela. "We need to talk. Now." Angela's face paled. "David, what's wrong?" "Sit down," I ordered, throwing the folder onto the coffee table. Photos of Angela with Richard, Michael, Alex, and Sean spilled out, along with the DNA results. "Start talking." Angela's eyes widened in horror as she saw the photos. Her hands flew to her mouth, tears already welling up. "David, I can explain." "Don't you dare," I snapped. 17 years, Angela. 17 years, and you've been lying to me. Clara isn't my daughter. Is she? Angela froze, her lips trembling. I didn't know for sure. For sure, I bellowed, cutting her off. You didn't know for sure, but you let me believe she was mine? You let me build my life around her. Around us. Tears streamed down Angela's face as she broke down, sobbing. "I'm sorry, David. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Save it," I growled. I turned to Clara, who sat frozen, her face pale. "Clara, you're old enough to hear this. I'm not your biological father." Her eyes widened, tears spilling down her cheeks. "What? No, Dad, that can't be true." I picked up the DNA results and handed them to her. "It's true. I got the test done. Angela's lies have ruined everything." Clara shook her head, staring at the paper in disbelief. "But you're still my dad, right? I don't care about the test. You're my dad." I hesitated, my anger softening as I saw the pain in her eyes. "Clara, I've loved you like my own for 17 years. That doesn't change overnight. But your mother has destroyed everything I thought I knew about this family." Angela sobbed uncontrollably, reaching out toward me. "David, please, we can fix this." "No, Angela. There's no fixing this," I said, my voice cold. "I'm filing for divorce. And Clara, you'll always have a place in my life if you want it. But I'm done with her." Angela collapsed onto the couch, her sobs echoing through the house. Clara sat silently, the weight of the truth crushing her. And me? I walked out of the room, grabbing my car keys, and left the house without looking back. I drove aimlessly through the streets, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a lead blanket. The betrayal, the lies, the realization that the life I had built for 17 years was based on a foundation of deceit. It was all too much. Eventually, I found myself parked in front of Nathan's office. I hadn't planned to go there, but there I was, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. After a few minutes of staring into the darkness, I got out and walked in. Nathan looked up from his desk, surprised to see me. "Dave," he said, setting down the papers he'd been reviewing. "What happened?" I dropped the DNA test results on his desk without a word. He glanced at the paper, then back at me, his expression grim. "So it's true." "It's true," I said flatly. 17 years, Nate. 17 years of my life, and she couldn't even tell me the truth. She let me love Clara. Let me believe she was mine. Nathan nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I already told her I'm filing for divorce," I said. "But I don't know what to do about Clara. She's still my daughter, Nate. She may not be mine by blood, but she's mine in every other way. I can't just walk away from her." "And you shouldn't," Nathan said firmly. "She's not the one who lied to you. Angela is." I sank into the chair across from him, running a hand through my hair. "I just feel lost. Everything I thought I knew is gone." Nathan leaned forward, his tone serious. "Listen to me, Dave. You're a good man, and you've been a good father to Clara. Blood doesn't make a family, love does. You've loved that girl her whole life, and she loves you. Don't let Angela's lies take that away from you." I nodded slowly, his words sinking in. "You're right. Clara's not to blame for any of this." "Damn right she isn't," Nathan said. "So what's next?" I exhaled deeply. "First, I'm getting out of that house. I can't stay there with Angela another day. I'll stay at my parents' place until the divorce is finalized. After that, I don't know." Nathan nodded. "One step at a time, Dave. You'll get through this." The next morning, I packed a suitcase and left the house. Angela didn't try to stop me, and Clara was still asleep. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. This was the end of one chapter and the painful start of another. At my parents' house, I explained the situation as best I could. They were shocked, of course, but supportive. My mother hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "You'll get through this, David. You're stronger than you think." Over the next few days, I focused on getting my life in order. I contacted James, the divorce attorney Nathan had recommended, and we began the process of filing for divorce. James assured me that with the evidence Nathan had gathered, the case was solid. Meanwhile, I made an effort to keep in touch with Clara. I called her every evening, and though the conversations were awkward at first, they gradually became more natural. She needed to know that I wasn't abandoning her, even if I was leaving Angela. One evening, Clara asked the question I had been dreading. "Dad, are you ever going to forgive Mom?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "I don't know, Clara. Forgiveness isn't something you can force. Right now, I just need time." She was silent for a moment before saying, "I hate what she did, but she's still my mom. I don't know how to feel about all of this." "I understand," I said gently. "It's okay to feel conflicted. Just remember that none of this is your fault." Weeks turned into months as the divorce proceedings dragged on. Angela tried to reach out a few times, but I kept my distance. My focus was on moving forward, on rebuilding my life. One day, as I was going through some old photos, Clara called. "Dad, can we meet? I need to talk to you." "Of course," I said. "Where do you want to meet?" "Let's go to the park," she suggested. "The one we used to go to when I was little." An hour later, I met her at the park. She was sitting on a bench, looking out at the lake. When I approached, she looked up and gave me a small smile. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, kiddo," I said, sitting beside her. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About Mom. About us. About everything." I nodded, letting her continue. "I know you're angry with Mom, and I get it, but I don't want to lose my family," she said, her voice trembling. "I know things will never be the same, but can we at least try to stay connected? You and me." I put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Clara, no matter what happens between your mom and me, you'll always be my daughter. I promise you that." Tears filled her eyes as she hugged me tightly. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, kiddo," I said, my voice breaking. "We'll get through this together." A few months later, the divorce hearing finally arrived. Angela sat across the courtroom, her head down, avoiding my gaze. My attorney, James, laid out the evidence Nathan's team had gathered: photos, text messages, and financial records proving Angela had used joint funds to support her affairs. It was damning. Angela's attorney tried to paint a picture of reconciliation, arguing that the marriage could still be salvaged. But the judge wasn't swayed. The evidence spoke for itself. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I was awarded sole ownership of the house, as Angela had no financial claim after her actions. Custody of Clara wasn't an issue since she was nearly an adult, but the judge made it clear that Clara's decision to maintain a relationship with either of us would be respected. Angela looked devastated as the gavel fell. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. With the divorce finalized, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I sold the house. It was too full of painful memories, and moved into a smaller, more manageable place closer to my parents. Clara visited often, and though she stayed with Angela most of the time, our bond remained strong. Angela, on the other hand, spiraled. Word of her affairs had spread through the community, and she became something of a pariah. Clara tried to maintain a relationship with her, but it was strained. Angela had betrayed not just me, but also the image of the family Clara had held onto for so long. The following spring, Clara graduated from high school. It was a bittersweet day, one filled with pride and a tinge of sadness at how much our lives had changed. Angela and I both attended, but we kept our distance. Clara had asked for a family photo, and though it was awkward, we managed a semblance of civility for her sake. After the ceremony, Clara hugged me tightly. "Thank you for coming, Dad. It means everything to me." "Of course, kiddo," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Months turned into a year, and life gradually settled into a new rhythm. Clara left for college, and I found myself adjusting to the quiet of an empty house. It wasn't easy, but it was peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. Angela tried to reach out occasionally, but I kept the communication strictly about Clara. Forgiveness, if it ever came, was still a long way off. My focus was on the future, on healing and finding happiness again. One evening, as I sat on the porch of my new home, watching the sunset, Clara called. She was thriving at college, studying psychology and making new friends. Her voice was filled with excitement as she shared stories of her classes and her plans for the future. "Dad," she said after a pause, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for staying even when things got hard, for being my rock." Her words hit me hard, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. "You don't have to thank me, Clara. You've always been worth it." As we hung up, I sat in the fading light, a sense of peace washing over me. Life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned, but I was learning to accept it. I'd lost a lot, but I'd also gained something priceless. A deeper bond with my daughter and a second chance to build a life on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the road ahead. Months turned into years, and life continued to evolve. Clara flourished in college, and our relationship remained as strong as ever. She visited during holidays and breaks, and each time I saw her, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Despite everything she'd been through, she was resilient, compassionate, and determined to build a better future for herself. As for me, I began to open myself up to the possibility of moving on. It wasn't easy. Trust didn't come naturally after Angela's betrayal, but with time, I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life defined by her mistakes. One summer, while visiting a local bookstore, I struck up a conversation with the owner, a woman named Sophie. She was kind, with an infectious laugh and a love for literature that matched my own. What started as casual chats during my visits turned into something more. After months of friendship, we went on our first date. It was awkward at first. I hadn't dated since Angela, and the idea of starting over felt daunting. But Sophie's patience and understanding helped me navigate the uncertainty. She wasn't just kind. She was genuine, someone who valued honesty and connection. Slowly, I began to trust again. Clara met Sophie during her winter break, and to my relief, they hit it off immediately. Clara was cautious at first, understandably protective, but Sophie won her over with her warmth and sincerity. Watching them laugh together over coffee felt like a glimpse of what life could be. A family rebuilt, not through blood but through choice and effort. Angela, meanwhile, continued to struggle. Her relationship with Clara had improved somewhat, but there was still a lingering tension that neither of them could fully resolve. Angela had reached out to me a few times, attempting to apologize or explain, but I kept our interactions minimal. Forgiveness was something I was working toward, but reconciliation was not on the table. 4 years after her high school graduation, Clara graduated from college with honors. It was a proud moment for both of us. She had worked tirelessly, and her achievements were a testament to her strength and determination. Angela attended the ceremony, and though things remained civil, the distance between us was palpable. After the ceremony, Clara pulled me aside. "Dad," she said, her eyes shimmering with tears, "I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you for being there for me, no matter what." I hugged her tightly. "You've always been my daughter, Clara. That will never change." Life after Clara's college graduation felt like a new chapter. She began her career as a counselor, helping others navigate the kind of pain she had experienced growing up. Her strength and empathy inspired me every day. Sophie and I continued to grow closer, and a year later, I asked her to marry me. It was a decision I made with complete clarity, not as a replacement for the life I had lost, but as a step forward toward the life I wanted. Clara stood by my side at the small, intimate ceremony, smiling through happy tears as Sophie and I exchanged vows. For the first time in years, I felt whole again, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Years later, as I sat on the porch with Sophie, watching the sunset, Clara arrived with her young son in tow. She had named him David after me. As he ran into my arms, laughing, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life hadn't been easy, but it had brought me here, to a place of love, resilience, and hope. Angela's betrayal no longer defined me. It was a painful chapter, but it had taught me the value of honesty, the strength of family, and the importance of moving forward. As Clara and her family joined us on the porch, I realized that, despite everything, I had found my way back to happiness. And for the first time in decades, I truly felt at peace. It had been nearly 10 years since Angela and I had divorced. I had moved on with Sophie, Clara had grown into a successful counselor, and life had finally settled into a rhythm I could describe as content. But one day, a phone call disrupted that peace. "David, it's Angela." Hearing her voice after so long felt surreal. I didn't respond immediately, unsure of what she wanted. "Please don't hang up," she said, her tone pleading. "I need to talk to you. It's important." "What is it, Angela?" I asked, my voice neutral. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I've been diagnosed with cancer. Stage 3. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Despite everything she had done, I never wished harm on her. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "What do you need from me?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've made so many mistakes, David. I need to make amends. With you, with Clara, with myself." When I told Sophie about the call, she listened patiently. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me feels like I owe her nothing. But another part knows she's still Clara's mother. Sophie placed a hand on mine. "You've always done what's right for Clara. Maybe this is one of those times." I decided to tell Clara about Angela's diagnosis. We met at a coffee shop, and as I shared the news, I saw a mix of emotions flicker across her face. Shock, sadness, and a hint of anger. "She wants to make amends," I said. "But it's up to you, Clara. You don't owe her anything." Clara was quiet for a long time before she spoke. "She's my mom, Dad. No matter what she's done, I can't just ignore this." A week later, Clara visited Angela. I didn't ask for details, but Clara later told me it was an emotional meeting. Angela had apologized profusely, breaking down as she admitted how much she regretted her choices. Clara listened but didn't offer forgiveness right away. "It'll take time," she told me, "but I'm willing to try." Angela asked to meet with me next. I hesitated but ultimately agreed. We met at a park, a neutral place where the memories wouldn't feel so heavy. She looked frilier than I remembered, her once vibrant presence now dimmed by her illness. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice soft. "What do you want, Angela?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "For everything, for the lies, the affairs, the pain I caused you and Clara. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to tell you that." I studied her for a moment, feeling a strange mix of emotions. "I've moved on, Angela. I've built a good life. But thank you for apologizing." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I'm glad you're happy. You deserve it." Over the next few months, Clara and Angela worked on rebuilding their relationship. I supported Clara as best as I could, even though I kept my distance from Angela. Sophie understood, offering me space to process the complicated emotions that resurfaced. Angela passed away a year later. Clara was with her, holding her hand during her final moments. At the funeral, Clara delivered a heartfelt eulogy, speaking about forgiveness and the strength it takes to confront the past. I stayed in the back, watching from afar. When Clara finished, she found me outside. "Thank you for coming, Dad," she said, tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Clara," I said, pulling her into a hug. "You've handled this with more grace than I ever could have." Years passed, and life continued to evolve. Clara eventually married, and I walked her down the aisle, tears streaming down my face as I gave her away. Sophie and I continued to build our life together, filled with quiet joys and steady love. Every now and then, I would think about Angela, not with anger but with a sense of closure. She had made mistakes, but in the end, she tried to make things right. And for Clara's sake, I was grateful for that. Life had a way of surprising me. It wasn't the path I had envisioned, but it was a path that taught me the strength of forgiveness, the value of resilience, and the enduring power of love. And for that, I was at peace. After Angela's passing, life settled into a steady rhythm. Clara visited often with her husband, Mark, and their young son, David Jr., who brought a new kind of joy into my life. Watching Clara thrive in her career and as a mother was a constant reminder of how far we'd come as a family. Sophie and I embraced the quieter years. We traveled when we could, explored our shared love of books and history, and spent countless evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing as the sun dipped below the horizon. Our life together wasn't flashy, but it was fulfilling in ways I hadn't thought possible after the turmoil of the past. One spring afternoon, Clara called with a sense of urgency in her voice. "Dad, are you free this evening? I have something to tell you." "Of course," I said. "Is everything okay?" "You'll see," she said, a hint of excitement breaking through her tone. That evening, Clara and Mark arrived at the house, David Jr. bouncing with excitement. After hugs and some catching up, Clara cleared her throat, looking between Sophie and me. "We wanted to tell you in person," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the room was silent as the words sank in. Then Sophie let out a joyful laugh, and I found myself grinning, pride and happiness swelling in my chest. "That's wonderful news, Clara," I said, pulling her into a hug. "You're going to be an amazing mom again." Mark chuckled. David Jr. is already planning on being the best big brother. We spent the rest of the evening celebrating, sharing stories, and imagining the future. It was one of those moments that reminded me how much I had to be grateful for. Months later, Clara gave birth to a baby girl, whom she named Angela, after her mother. It was a decision that surprised me at first, but when Clara explained, it made sense. "Mom made mistakes," she said, cradling baby Angela in her arms. "But in the end, she tried to make things right. I want my daughter to know that people can change, that forgiveness is possible." Her words hit me deeply. I realized how much Clara had grown, how much stronger and wiser she had become through everything we'd endured as a family. Little Angela brought a new kind of light into our lives. Watching her and David Jr. grow up was a joy I hadn't expected to experience. Sophie and I became doting grandparents, always ready with stories, hugs, and a few too many sweets. As the years went by, I found myself reflecting more often on the twists and turns of my life. There were moments of immense pain and betrayal, but there were also moments of profound love and redemption. Clara's strength and compassion, Sophie's unwavering support, and the joy of watching my grandchildren grow. It all added up to a life I was proud of. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Sophie, Clara joined us, a cup of tea in her hands. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the horizon. "You know, Dad," Clara said softly, "if there's one thing I've learned from everything, it's that life doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful." I smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You're right, kiddo. And sometimes the beauty comes from the imperfections." As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. My life hadn't gone as planned, but it had brought me here, to a place of love, family, and hard-earned happiness. And for that, I was profoundly grateful. Years turned into decades, and life continued its steady march forward. Sophie and I grew older together, sharing countless memories that filled our days with warmth. Clara, Mark, and their children thrived, bringing energy and laughter to every family gathering. Little Angela grew into a confident and kind young woman, and David Jr. followed in his mother's footsteps, pursuing a career in psychology. One crisp autumn evening, the family gathered at my home. The leaves were golden and crimson, scattered across the yard like nature's own confetti. Sophie had baked her famous apple pie, and the smell filled the house, mingling with the sound of children's laughter and the murmur of conversation. As we sat around the table after dinner, Clara raised her glass. "To Dad," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "for teaching us all what it means to be strong, to love unconditionally, and to never give up on family." The table erupted in cheers and clinking glasses, and I couldn't help but smile, my heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Looking around the table, I saw the faces of those I loved most. Sophie, Clara, Mark, David Jr., Angela, and the rest of our growing family. Not long after that evening, I found myself slowing down. Age was catching up to me, and I embraced it with the same quiet acceptance I had learned through the trials of my life. Sophie and I spent our days reading, reminiscing, and enjoying the simple pleasures of being together. One morning, as the sun streamed through the windows, I sat in my favorite chair by the fire, a photo album in my lap. The pages were filled with snapshots of my life. Pictures of Clara as a baby, family vacations, and moments of joy that had sustained me through even the darkest times. Sophie walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "How lucky I've been," I replied, my voice tinged with emotion. "Despite everything, I've lived a good life." She kissed my forehead and sat beside me, holding my hand as we gazed out the window at the autumn leaves swaying in the breeze. When the time came, I passed quietly, surrounded by the family I had built, the family that had carried me through life's twists and turns. My final moments were filled with the sounds of their laughter, the warmth of their love, and the knowledge that I had given them the best of myself. At my memorial, Clara spoke once again, standing strong and composed as she addressed the crowd of family and friends. "My dad taught me that life isn't about perfection," she said. "It's about resilience, about love, and about finding beauty in the moments we're given. He wasn't just my father. He was my compass, my guide, and my hero. I'll carry his lessons with me for the rest of my life." Sophie, too, spoke of the life we had shared. David was a man who found strength in his struggles, joy in his family, and peace in the love he gave. "I'll miss him every day, but I'm grateful for every moment we had. Though I was gone, my presence lived on in the lives of those I loved." Clara continued to guide her own children with the same strength and compassion she had learned from me. David Jr. and Angela grew into remarkable adults, carrying forward the values of resilience and love. And Sophie, my partner and friend, kept my memory alive in the stories she shared with the family, ensuring that the lessons I had learned, and the love I had given, would never be forgotten. In the end, my life was not defined by the pain I endured but by the love I chose to give. It was a legacy of resilience, forgiveness, and the quiet beauty of an imperfect but deeply meaningful life. And for that, I was truly at peace. Life's twists test resilience and love. Could you forgive and rebuild? Or would you walk away? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more thought-provoking stories.